Good afternoon, everyone. Just a few items here at the top to pass along, and then happy to take your questions. So first, a Hawaii update. As of this morning, approximately 580 National Guardsmen, 133 additional DoD personnel, and 119 Coast Guardsmen are actively engaged in the coordinated response to the Western Maui wildfire. U.S. Army Pacific is executing 9 approved mission assignments from FEMA. The most recent mission assignment addition is portable water distribution support. Navy Mobile Diving Salvage Unit teams from Pacific Fleet concluded their dive operations yesterday, and JTF 50 continues search and rescue activities with the Hawaii National Guard teams, FBI, and the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency. Hawaii National Guard continues 24-hour support to local law enforcement, while the U.S. Army 25th Infantry Division's fueling trucks distributed about 470 gallons of fuel over the past 48 hours in support of U.S. Army Corps of Engineers temporary power operations. Pacific Forces delivered 2 trucks, 2 large water tanks, and 6 operators from the 25th Infantry Division to Maui in support of the water distribution mission. Pacific Fleet's Navy Environmental Preventative Medicine Unit 6 will deploy 2 sailors to Maui later today in support of potable water testing for the JTF water distribution mission. The department and the JTF 50 continue to work closely together with state officials, FEMA, and other supporting agencies to support the people of Hawaii in response to this terrible disaster. On the hurricane that's making its way towards Florida, as you've probably seen, the Florida National Guard have been fully activated under state active duty with a mobilization of over 3,000 guardsmen in position across the state for preparedness and response efforts. An additional 1,800 guardsmen are on their way, bringing the total to 5,500 prior to the storm landing. The department stands ready to assist the state of Florida, FEMA, and state and local officials in any recovery efforts that are needed. Today, the department also announced an additional security assistance to meet Ukraine's critical security and defense needs. This announcement is the Biden administration's 45th drawdown of equipment to be provided from DoD inventories to Ukraine since August 2021. It includes additional air defense and artillery munitions, mine-clearing equipment, medical vehicles, and other equipment to help Ukraine counter Russia's ongoing war of aggression. The U.S. will continue to work with its allies and partners to provide Ukraine with the capabilities to meet its immediate battlefield needs and longer-term security assistance requirements. Additional details of the security assistance package will be available on defense.gov. And finally, the Secretary spoke by phone today with Qatar Deputy Prime Minister of State for Defense Affairs, His Excellency Dr. Khalid bin Mohammed Al Attiyah, to discuss the importance of the U.S.-Qatar defense partnership and the U.S. commitment to a strong bilateral relationship built on common interests and mutual respect. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions. I'm going to go to the phones first because I believe we have Tara joining us by phone today. So Tara, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thanks for doing this. In the National Guard buildup for this storm, that seems like a really high number to have about 5,000 assembled ready. Is there a sense that this storm will be more serious than anticipated? And then you've seen MacDill evacuate. Are there any plans for any other base evacuations?
Thanks, Tara. So in terms of any other additional base evacuations, as you know, there are well over 20 bases across the state of Florida. So I would refer you to the services to further comment on how they plan to prepare for the storm and evacuate their bases or installations as appropriate. As I mentioned, I believe in the top, this is the Florida National Guard that's been activated under state duty. I just saw that the FEMA administrator was briefing the press earlier today. I think this is a storm that we are certainly taking seriously. The state of Florida is taking seriously in terms of not only making sure that we have the appropriate number of people in the state of Florida to help with any response that's needed, but also pre-positioning any assets or any forces that might be needed in the aftermath of the storm. In terms of the storm and how quickly it's moving, how much damage we can expect, I would really direct you to FEMA for that. But the department stands ready to assist the state of Florida and FEMA in what it might need. I'll come back into the room. Yeah, Janie.
Thank you. I have two questions.
Sure.
Regarding the North Korea's satellite launch, experts pointed out that the recent failure of North Korea's satellite launch could be a self-destruction. Has the U.S. analyzed anything about this?
About the failed test?
Yes.
Nothing that we've analyzed other than that we certainly monitored that that there was a space launch, an attempted space launch, but nothing further than what we've said previously. I'm sorry, maybe I'm not understanding the question fully.
Yeah, maybe U.S. is still analyzing this, or why they failure this in the satellite.
We continue to monitor the actions that the DPRK takes whenever it comes to a missile or a space launch or a missile launch like this one. We're aware that the DPRK is using ballistic missile technology, which is a violation of multiple UN security resolutions. The behavior that we've seen continues to destabilize and undermine security in the region. But other than that, I just don't have more at this time. Sure.
When will the missile warning information system for North Korea between the United States and South Korea, Japan, begin to operate under the recent Camp David, agreement? Do you have anything on that? When they're gonna be, working this system right away?
Well, you mean following the Camp David meeting? We just conducted a trilateral exercise that followed the historic Camp David summit. It brought together, of course, even closer the leaders of the United States, Japan, and the ROC. We are committed to peace and prosperity in the region, and we'll continue to engage with our partners and allies in the region. But I don't have more in terms of any further response from the United States. Great. Hey, Laura. Yeah.
Thank you. Senator Kane recently called for an investigation into the accident in Australia that killed 3 Marines the other day. Is DoD going to be doing an investigation into this specific incident, and not just this specific incident, but a broader investigation of these mishaps, aviation mishaps that have been happening?
Sure. Well, first, as you probably saw, the Secretary over the weekend issued a statement just offering our condolences, and of course I'd like to offer that here from the podium. Our deepest condolences go out to the Marines that were killed in that exercise. As with any training accident, there is an investigation underway to determine exactly what happened. And you've heard from myself and others that the safety and security of any of our service members is a priority. So, of course, we would take any lessons learned from that investigation and apply it forward. I'm sorry, and your second question?
A broader investigation of the aviation mishaps that have been
So
happening.
each mishap that happens or each incident, there is always an investigation that happens, but I would view these as separate ones, not one that needs to be a holistic view of any aircraft or any operation. So there is an investigation into this incident, as there have been investigations in the past to individual mishaps or incidents. Yeah.
Thanks, Sabrina. Just to follow up on the Osprey line of questioning.
Sure.
Starting last year, both the Air Force and the Marine Corps acknowledged that the Osprey has this rare but persistent issue with its clutch. Is the DoD concerned about this engineering fault, which the Marines admit doesn't have a permanent solution yet, as far as just the platform itself is concerned broadly?
Well, in terms of the incident that happened over this past weekend, again, that's still under investigation. So I don't want to jump ahead or get to jump to any conclusions that haven't been reached yet. As I mentioned to Laura, each incident undergoes its own investigation. I wouldn't right now apply a sweeping broad stroke across every incident, linking them together. They're all very unfortunate. Every time this happens, of course, we always think about the service members who are putting their lives at risk, but I wouldn't say that they're all connected in one way or the other.
Does the Pentagon have confidence in the Osprey as an airframe?
I think we do certainly have confidence in the Osprey. If anything changes, if these investigations lead to something that would cause us or a service to adjust anything about how we believe the Osprey should be used, we would do that. But at this time, we have confidence in that. Hey, Dan.
Isn't it worth looking at a broader issue of aviation safety? I mean, there was a GAO report, as you know, that did say there was a broader problem in the Army and the National Guard over a whole period of years, where they found that there was a problem with maintenance and a problem with pilots being able to get enough hours in the air because the aircraft weren't ready to fly. Is that something you're at least considering, a broader look at safety?
At the moment, right now, no. We are focused on what happened in this particular incident and what has happened in previous incidents. But I really would steer away from linking them together right now because they're still being investigated. And until we have a proper conclusion, I don't want to get ahead of anything ahead of the investigation or ahead of any recommendation that the secretary or a service might have for the secretary.
Clarify, just in terms of the storm, the hurricane.
Yeah.
For U.S. bases, what I may have missed it. What are the precautions being taken?
So in terms of each base, there are, I think, approximately 20 in the state of Florida, and each one will conduct its own evacuation procedures depending on where they are. So I'd refer you to each installation in terms of how they're handling the incoming storm or the incoming hurricane. We have had MacDill evacuate non-essential personnel as they are, I believe the storm is coming up right along the coast there. But in terms of other individual bases, I would just refer you to the service for more questions. Great. Yeah, right here.
Thanks. On Turkey, the U.S. Embassy in Turkey announced that USS Gerald Ford was docked, I guess, over the weekend. Turkish media reports say that there was a joint exercise, and they called it the largest ever between the two militaries. Can you, provide any details on those joint military exercises?
Sure. I'd have to actually take that question for you. I just don't have more details to provide from here at this time, so I'd be happy to take that one.
One more.
Sure.
I believe it was April, the Turkish drone strike that targeted a convoy that had a Kurdish military official and 3 U.S. service members in it. There was an investigation launched, the Pentagon told us at the time, and repeated questions asking about that investigation. The response that we've gotten multiple times now is that there's no comment. Is this investigation closed? Is there a reason? Could you provide any updates on that?
I believe you asked me about this just a few months ago. I don't have any updates for you at this time. I'm happy to take a look and come back to you, but at the moment from this podium right now, I just don't have any updates. I'm going to go to the phones really quickly. Jim Laporta, the messenger.
Hi, thank you for doing this. On the security assistance to Ukraine that was announced today, I had 2 questions. The 155 millimeter artillery shells, does that include D-Pick'ems? And then also, is this the first time the U.S. has sent Sidewinders, the AIM 9Ms?
In terms of the Sidewinders, I do not believe so, but I'd be happy to check that. In terms of were there any D-Pick'ems included in this round of, in terms of were there any D-Pick'ems included in this 45th drawdown? There were not. With that, we'll go to Heather, USNI.
Great, thank you so much. I was wondering, just to go back to the Osprey questions, what is the breakdown between the U.S. and Australia in terms of investigations going on into what happened with the crash?
Well, the Marine Corps will be conducting its own investigation, but of course this was a joint exercise, so there will be collaboration and partnership there. But for more details on the investigation, I would refer you to the Marine Corps to answer those questions. Okay, great. I'll come back in the room. Oren and then Carla.
There's a hearing going on right now with Gold Star families from the Abbey Gate bombing, and at the beginning of the hearing, Congressman McCall, chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, said 2 years later, we're still here seeking answers. How did this happen? What went wrong? Why couldn't this tragedy have been prevented? These questions remain unanswered because this administration wants to sweep what happened under the rug. They know they bear the brunt of the blame and they want to escape any accountability. Do you care to respond to that?
Well, I haven't seen the comments that were made as I think you mentioned that this is ongoing right now. But first, let me say that the secretary and others in this department have expressed they're incredibly grateful for the service and sacrifice that our service members have made in Afghanistan, and those who were committed to the evacuation operations. In terms of responding to some of the comments that were made, I think you know that CENTCOM conducted a very comprehensive, credible, and definitive investigation into the Abbey Gate bombing following the attack. Our U.S. military commanders on the ground made the best decisions that they could, that they were provided with the intelligence and the evidence that they were given on the ground that they were able to make those decisions in I'm sorry, let me just take a step back because I realize I'm sort of jumbling my words here. U.S. military commanders on the ground in Afghanistan made decisions that they could with the information that they had at the time. They were fully given they were given the decision-making capability and were responding to threats on the ground in real time. And so we are very proud of the work that our commanders and our service members did, not during just the evacuation in those few weeks, but over the 20-year war. And I think, as you probably know, that we also did a very deep investigative AAR that we submitted to Congress that also provided members of the SASC and HASC committee with our findings of not just the evacuation, but just our larger takeaways from Afghanistan. And I'll leave it at that.
One follow-up
Sure.
question. Congressman McCall has been working on his own investigation of the withdrawal itself and the circumstances around it. You talked about the CENTCOM investigation, the AAR as well, that looked over all of that. Is it your position that there is nothing more to learn, that everything that has been learned about it could be learned, or is there more information out there that could be made public that we haven't heard about yet?
Well, I think from the investigations and from the investigation that CENTCOM did in particular around Abbey Gate, it was incredibly exhaustive, interviewing over 100 members that were on the ground and in this department to figure out what exactly happened. We, of course, welcome transparency. We welcome accountability. We are accountable to Congress, and that is why we submitted the AAR when we did. That's also why CENTCOM led the investigation and interviewed the many people that were involved in the evacuation. And so we feel confident in our efforts to get to the truth, to get to the facts, and of course, what we think about as we are coming up on the 2-year anniversary is the service members, the civilians who dedicated their lives in Afghanistan. And so that's something that we're thinking about around the 2-year anniversary as we close out the month of August. I think I said Carla next.
Yeah, sure. And I think that Chairman Milley had said that he would welcome additional investigations to the post. Does the Pentagon support additional investigations? I know you said you welcome transparency. Is that a yes, that you are welcoming McCall's investigation as well?
If there is an investigation led in Congress, of course we will cooperate. But again, we feel very confident in the efforts that were led by CENTCOM and by the SIGAR report that was submitted to Congress on our efforts in Afghanistan.
And then on Niger, has the U.S. flown any drone missions out of any bases in Niger since the president of Niger was forcibly removed from office?
So I'm not going to comment on any ISR capabilities or flights out of Niger, but what I can tell you is that we continue to maintain and protect our interests in the region, and we'll continue to work to protect our allies and partners in the region. And we have other means of doing that, but I just don't have anything more to say.
I won't say whether or not it's...
We don't comment on ISR operations, so I'm just not going to go into that.
Okay, well, is the counter-terror mission in West Africa, is that on pause as a whole? Because, not just in Niger, but those drone bases are responsible for areas outside of Niger as well.
So we have other ways. Again, we have redundancies around the world and in the region that allow for us to continue to protect our interests of our allies and the United States, but I'm just not going to get into any further intelligence.
Okay, and so finally, would you say that the counterterrorism mission in West Africa, is it being hindered by this situation, this coup, or are things able to go as business as usual?
Well, it's certainly not business as usual, as we're not conducting operations or conducting any other exercises within our Nigerian counterparts at this moment. What we're focused on, what this building and other agencies remain focused on, is seeing a resolve to this diplomatically. And so I'll just leave it at that. Yeah. Hey, Chris.
Thank you. On the on the forces the U.S. Sent to the Gulf in response to the Iranian actions that you yourself announced and said didn't want to put a timeline on, has the Pentagon seen a decrease in that Iranian threat? How are you going to judge when those forces can come back and when they need to stay? I mean, what's that look like in this bill?
Well, I can't predict the future. So I will say that, as long as there remains a need for these forces to be in the region, they're going to stay there. They are there to deter any threats or unprofessional, unsafe from IRGC-backed groups, and I'll just have to leave it at that.
When you say same forces, is it possible that these forces remain in the region? Is that force posture, or could we see rotational of similar assets if this becomes an ongoing?
I don't have anything to announce today. I have no updates or changes to announce in terms of the forces that were moved to the region at this time. If that does change, I'd be happy to read that out, but at this moment I just don't have anything. Great. Do you have anything else? Sure, David.
The drawdown, how much is left now in the Ukraine funding? And does that authority expire at the end of September, or does it carry over into the next fiscal year?
Good question. So in terms of how much is left, I would have to take that question and get back to you. I just don't have that on hand in terms of the funds that are left. You might remember that this was a recalculation done of previous PDAs. So because it was a recalculation, this would not expire at the end of the fiscal year. We're confident that we will have enough money to meet Ukraine's need through the fiscal year, but as you know, there's been a request for a supplemental, and we're hopeful that the Congress will approve a supplemental package for Ukraine.
Can you put that answer out as a taken question?
For how much is left? Yes, absolutely. Yep. Liz, and then I'll come back to you.
Thanks. Can you explain the announcement from Secretary Hicks a little bit from yesterday on the replicator drone program?
Sure. So the replicator initiative is another tool for us to innovate and to modernize and to keep a pace with the PRC. The replicator is basically a way to accelerate innovation by the warfighter by delivering low-cost autonomous systems at a scale of multiple thousands across warfighting domains, and that should be in a timeline between 18 to 24 months. The Secretary and the Deputy have been focused on this urgency to innovate, and the replicator is that next step. Great. Sure, Fadi, hi.
Has there been any effort to evacuate American personnel from Niger involving U.S. assets from Europe?
There's been no change to our force posture at this moment. So in terms of any evacuations, I would say no. If that changes, I'd be happy to keep you updated. I will take one more question from the phone. Howard Altman.
Hey, thanks, Sabrina. I got two questions, actually. One is on the Pickums. David Ignatius over the weekend talked about the rocket launch to Pickums, probably the M26, being the U.S. being closer to providing those. Can you give us an update? Is that on the table? And then I have a question about Ukraine claims, and satellite imagery seems to back that up, that Russia is sinking ferries along the Kerch Bridge to protect it against sea drones. And I wanted to get a Pentagon assessment on that.
Hey, thanks, Howard, for the question. I just don't have, on both of those questions, I just don't have more of an update to provide. I'm on your second part, just in terms of where, I think you're asking on where Russians are amassing forces along a bridge. I'm just not going to get into any intelligence assessments that we have here. I would refer you to the Ukrainians to speak to their operations. In terms of what the Ukrainians are doing in their counteroffensive, we're seeing that they have continued to make slow progress and are continuing in this fight as the months continue. And so I would just leave it at that and direct you to the Ukrainians for further comment. Great. Anyone else in the room? Dan. Okay, last question to Dan, and then I'll wrap it up.
Presumably ATACMS are still not something that the administration is considering providing Ukraine?
I don't have any update for you on anything that we're providing regarding ATACMS.
Is it still under consideration?
I mean, I have no updates for you when it comes to ATACMS. I think the Ukrainians, as you've seen, have been using, whether it's the HIMARS or the Storm Shadow, in quite incredible effect on the battlefield, but I just don't have anything to announce when it comes to ATACMS.
Just going back to the question about the Gulf, since over the past several months, has the threat reduced in terms of U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria from Iranian-backed militia, or in the Strait of Hormuz in terms of commercial shipping? Is there an assessment that the temperature has dropped slightly in that whole situation?
I wouldn't know that I'd make an assessment on temperature dropping. We continue to see harassment. Over the past few weeks, we've seen harassment from IRGC-backed groups over commercial ships. And so as that continues, that's why we moved our forces into the region as we did. We have not seen that threat drop, I would say, so we haven't seen a reason to move our forces out. So until there's a change, I'm just going to leave it at that.
And then the final thing that has got some attention, is the U.S. considering reestablishing the nuclear weapons mission in the United Kingdom?
I think I saw the report that you're referencing. So consistent with our longstanding practice, we just do not disclose the specifics of U.S. nuclear posture or basing. It is U.S. policy to neither confirm nor deny the presence or absence of nuclear weapons at any general or specific location. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.